Welcome to The State of Us. Real people with honest opinions and the future of responsible media. Here's your host, Justin T. Weller.
Kushner's security clearance may have been pushed through by the president. The United States and North Korea are trading blame for an abrupt end to their negotiations, and Cohen's testimony ignites a new debate. Well, there's been a lot going on, and the State of Us, of course, hasn't really been talking about it. And you might be wondering why. Well, that's because we just honestly thought there were other things that you needed to know. It's been covered extensively, of course, by your mainstream cable news outlets. And the reason that we're combining these today is just giving us an opportunity to give for you to hear our thoughts on these items in one show so that we can take next week to continue to provide you valuable educational content that might actually, be super important for you to be up to speed on. So anyway, that's what we're doing today.
Yeah, but why should they care that we're going to do that?
That's a good question. You've got a lot of different analyses on this week, and you've got a lot of different reporting and coverage. So hopefully we're going to provide a very uniform, different take on some of this stuff.
Well, and I would say too, what we did was we waited till it was over, and now we're going to talk about it.
Right.
So we don't do any of that speculation stuff that everybody was doing after each day or after each event in each of these situations. We've kind of waited till it's all happened and it's all out there and it's all taken place. And now we're going to give you some educated opinions on this, hopefully in a respectful manner.
Exactly. Usually we try to forego, with rare exception, we try to forego covering something as it takes place just because so often we feel that coverage is lacking in the respect that it just can't encompass the full picture, and you're making comments on things that you might change later once you have more information. So usually we try to avoid that, but today we've got a lot of conclusions on a number of these items, or at least enough conclusion that we can talk about it. So first up, the United States and North Korea. This is from the Wall Street Journal on March 1st. The U.S. and North Korea blamed each other for their failure to reach an agreement at their second summit aimed at curbing Pyongyang's nuclear weapon program, leaving an uncertain path for one of President Trump's signature foreign policies. The president said, "I am never afraid to walk away from a deal." Now, what exactly happened? Well, the president said he hadn't committed to a follow-up summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, but didn't close the door to future negotiations, saying that, quote, "eventually we'll get there," end quote. Meanwhile, Mr. Trump said Mr. Kim pledged not to conduct testing or, quote, "rockets and nuclear," end quote. Mr. Trump said Mr. Kim was prepared to dismantle the North's nuclear complex, the site of a reactor and plutonium processing plant, if the U.S. would agree to ease sanctions. But Washington wanted any deal to include other parts of the North's nuclear program. Mr. Trump said, including undeclared sites for producing highly enriched uranium. Quote, "Basically, they wanted the sanctions lifted in their entirety, and we couldn't do that," end quote, Mr. Trump said. Quote, "I just felt it wasn't good enough," he said. We had to have more, according to the president. Now, so basically what you've got is the U.S. saying, what they wanted is for us to get rid of all sanctions in exchange for this. And then in contrast to that, hours after Mr. Trump spoke, Mr. Ri said at a news conference that Pyongyang had offered to, quote, "permanently and completely dismantle all nuclear material production facilities in that area, including plutonium and uranium in the presence of U.S. experts," end quote, if the U.S. were to lift sanctions targeting civilians. He said the U.S. demanded a further step beyond that site's dismantling, upon which, quote, "it became crystal clear the U.S. was not ready to accept our proposal," end quote. He suggested that North Korea would stand firm even though the United States proposes negotiations again in the future. So just for anybody who's not clear, right, what's happening here is the U.S. is saying they wanted all the sanctions lifted in exchange for this one site, and they're saying, no, we just wanted sanctions against civilians lifted in exchange for this site, and we were okay with U.S. inspectors. Of course, nobody knows exactly what actually happened, because clearly one of the two of them has to be wrong, or they're both wrong. unless there was just something lost in translation.
But they're good friends.
So
this actually makes me happy.
I figured it might.
This is the normal tack that U.S. North Korea relations should take. So on this one, gosh, I'd have to almost one thumb up. I don't know if I'll give 2 thumbs up because still can't tell the truth. But actually, what I don't like is how the Trump administration, how President Trump has said so many nice things about the dictator of North Korea. That really bothers me. But as far as the negotiations and walking away and having a disagreement, I'm happy for that. I think that's a smart move. I don't think you can, it's been proven by the 2 previous presidents who have tried to negotiate things with North Korea that you can't trust them, that they will go back on their word, or at least what we thought their word was. So I don't think there's anything to be gained. I guess talking is better than not talking, but you're really not going to get anything because whatever they agree to, they're going to break. That's their history anyway. That's the history of this dictator in North Korea. So I like the fact that President Trump walked away.
I figured you would. He's saying, basically what they were offering is not good enough. And so that's that. Kind of interesting though, because.
And it's normal that they would have differing opinions on what happened.
Well, sure.
So, that's a normalization of the relationship. That's weird with President Trump. What we're normally used to in relationship with
in regards to previous administrations,
President Trump has blown out of the water. This is almost a normal conclusion to a meeting between the United States and North Korea.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I struggled with the fact that the whole thing, the negotiations and the entire summit's just it's done because we couldn't. I feel like there was probably something else that happened.
Well, now we're speculating
that we're not sure about.
You know what happened?
What?
Michael Cohen took the stand.
Is that what happened?
That's what happened.
Well, why is that a good reason though to just abruptly end? Wouldn't you want to drag out the negotiations to keep the news away from that?
I think Trump felt like he needed to get back in the United States and change the message, and he couldn't do it in North Korea because he realized he wasn't going to be able to come out of North Korea with a deal that he wanted. And so he thought, I got to get out of here and get back home before my whole family ends up in jail.
Well, they were in Vietnam, but in the North Korea negotiations, right?
Right.
Okay. Just so people know.
Well, that's a whole
President Trump wasn't in North Korea.
That's a whole other issue too.
Yeah.
About where they chose to take place.
Oh, you don't like that it was in Vietnam?
And why it had to be, and why
what was that? That was an interesting noise. I don't know if we've ever gotten that answer before.
Well, it's because the North Korean president can't fly or North Korean dictator can't fly because it's there would be too likely for there to be an assassination attempt on his life. So we had to do it somewhere where
you could get to by land.
You could get through it by land. Yeah. That tells you a little bit maybe about how nice this guy is. But anyway.
The rest of the world's not a big fan.
Only President Trump seems to be a big fan.
Well, isn't that just a negotiating tactic though? In fairness, isn't this just to butter them up so that they'll be more likely to do what we want? No, because
who are the 2 people he likes?
Well, but then isn't that a negotiation tactic for Putin as well?
But what are the people who are the people he doesn't like? Theresa May and Angela Merkel.
Does he have anything to negotiate with them on though?
Oh, sure.
The
whole European Union
from his perspective.
No, he
that's
doesn't
what
want.
I'm getting at.
No, he's already built his resorts in those countries.
I'm not saying it's a good process. I'm saying though, is that the justification?
The only reason he has is because he wants to build a resort and make money off of them. So he's trying to get that resort built in Russia, and he likes the beaches in North Korea. So that's the only reason he's being nice to them. And no, he's already built the resort in England, and I don't know that he's interested in building one in Germany. So. Yeah, there really is no reason to be nice to them because everything about the presidency is for Donald Trump to make money when it's over.
But just to be clear, you're pleased with the end result of the negotiations. Yes. Okay. I'm not thrilled. I'm not opposed to walking away if you can't get a good deal. it felt to me like I said, and we won't know because it's not for us to know unless, one of the individuals that was actually in the meeting comes forward and says, okay, this is what happened.
Well, at least there were notes taken. Come on.
Right.
When we met with Putin, we didn't even have notes taken.
No.
Because they were all thrown out of the room. Oh, yeah. Plus the fact that.
Well, these two did have a private meeting in the morning before the official negotiations.
Yes, but there are still note takers there. Whereas in the private meeting with Vladimir Putin, it was a private meeting with nobody there.
That's right.
Which is not official protocol.
It's not official protocol, but it's not illegal. Not right either. Okay. Well, it's fine to think that. Like I said, I just felt like it ended. It seems to me that if the true case here was just they were not on the same page about like how they were going to handle this first step, that seems like an odd reason to, in and of itself, to just walk away. So in my mind, it seems like maybe it's, the Cohen testimony, maybe it's not, but there's some other motivation that it was just over because you have all these meetings planned. And this is just one of like the first round of official negotiations. And for it to end over something like this, it seems like there could have been some more discussing because to me, if what North Korea is saying is true, which again, we don't know. But if what they've said, right, is that they were willing to permanently and completely dismantle all nuclear material production at the northern facility, including plutonium, uranium, and in the presence of U.S. experts, to just lift sanctions against civilians. That seems like, not saying we should accept those terms, but that seems like a really negotiable point.
Reason to keep talking?
Right. And that's the public statement that their spokesperson gave. So even if that's not what was said in the meeting, now you have that statement to fall back on where, the U.S. should turn around and say, well, is that really the offer? Because then, let's keep talking. Or is it what you said in the meeting, which isn't that? So to me, that's why it ended.
And since the Secretary of State and other officials haven't responded to what Pyongyang said, it makes you think that there's something else that went on.
Right. And again, I'm not going to speculate about what that was because we just don't know.
Because if that was a good deal, if Secretary Pompeo thought that was a good deal, we'd be doing exactly what you said.
That's what I'm thinking.
So that wasn't proposed.
Because that doesn't, just tell me if you think I'm wrong, but that seems like
no, there's
a potentially
there's
agreeable
wiggle room. There's wiggle room for both sides.
Yeah.
With that, you could both claim victory with that. It wouldn't solve the problem, but it would both sides could look good.
It would certainly be
taking that
a much bigger step than we've had before.
Right.
Allowing, because that's the key there too. U.S. inspectors.
Right.
That's, so.
Which is why I think now President Trump's finding out what it's like to negotiate with a communist dictator.
Who's
a bigger liar than you are.
Right. Well, and this guy, keeping in mind, at least some of the other Northern Korean leaders knew what it was like before. This guy doesn't. He's only, I forget how old, but he's young and he's grown up. He took
over for his dad, right?
With the North and South.
He knows what's going on.
Being separate. I'm saying he was never alive for one Korea and doesn't have he doesn't know what the war was. There's none of that is right. My point. All he's ever grown up with is there's a North and a South Korea and the world hates us.
I understand.
So there's a very different mindset than somebody who at least remembers what the world was kind of like before all that happened.
I gotcha.
That's what I'm getting at. So take it for what you will. There's not a lot more to say about that right now until the next meeting, which is not set or confirmed that they'll go to, other than the president did say that he's open to he's basically not said, no, there's no way we're going to talk ever again. So
he likes his little buddy from North Korea.
And we've seen this in other negotiations,
little
right?
Rocket Man, right?
Leaving that door open. He really doesn't like to say, no. It's not for now.
Oh, he does, but just not on the public stage.
Well, yeah, not about this.
Yeah. He's famous in New York City for not paying contractors for work that they've done. So he's perfectly capable.
So we're going to let Lance lead us on the Cohen testimony. But before we get to that, I think it's important that we review with people what we're trying to do here today with our 3 topics. And what is that, Lance?
Well, I think what we're trying to do here is to uphold the mission. And our mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And I know I'm using a respectful tone. I'm not sure I'm using respectful words, but I am using a respectful tone so far today.
Well, we could ask.
And if people don't like it, and then we have an ethics department.
That's right.
And they can contact said department.
And we do have a I'm using air quotes here, generally speaking, Trump supporter in the building, right? So,
I've never heard him say anything. You keep telling me that he is, but
I'm just looking at the evidence on social media
of his. Well, I don't look there. So
okay.
I haven't.
Well, we can pull some of it up, I suppose.
No, that's okay. It's probably better that I don't know.
Okay. You'll like him more if you don't hear.
Probably.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So I don't know. We could ask him, for a simple Hunger Games, thumb up, thumb down, or no, not Hunger Games.
I was going to say that's the Roman Emperor.
Yeah.
Right?
That's what I'm thinking of. Yeah. Gladiator game. Is Lance being respectful enough of the president? Oh, okay. We got a thumbs up. So
I thought it was a thumb sideways.
Well, it started there.
It started there and went up.
And then it went up.
Okay. All right. Well,
so it's,
I'm trying.
I'm
trying.
You're leaning to the positive.
Okay, yes.
That's right. You can email ethics@truechat.org if you think Lance is out of line. If you think I'm out of line, you can call Lance. And
because I agree with you, he is.
That's right. To say there won't be any objection there. So. And if you want to get involved, let us know your thoughts at TrueChat.org on social media. So Lance, tell us, what's the deal with Cohen here? What's going on?
Well, this is from a New York Times article entitled 5 Takeaways from Cohen's Testimony to Congress, published on February 27th, 2019. It starts out, Michael D. Cohen made it personal. His words were blunt and salacious and outlined a vivid bill of particulars against the President of the United States. I just want to stop right there for a second. And we heard very normally the Republicans attacking Michael Cohen and the Republicans on the committee attacking Michael Cohen and saying, why should we believe you when you're a convicted liar? And since I am the resident historian at TrueChat, I just want to make that connection that Michael Cohen could very likely be John Dean from Watergate. When John Dean, who was very close to the president, first testified in front of the Senate Watergate committee, everybody said there's no way that President Nixon did the things that John Dean said. There's no way. John Dean is a liar. His testifying is wrong. He just made all this stuff up because there's no way a president of the United States would do what John Dean said that Richard Nixon did. Turned out that everything that John Dean said was exactly what the president had done. So if you just take that for what it's worth, is that Michael Cohen could be Watergate's version of this version of Watergate's John Dean. And that is, he's saying some things, and we're going to go over what he said. And I'm not saying whether they're true or not, but those who speak against him, like there's no way that a sitting president would do this. That's the same thing that Congress people and senators said about John Dean when he testified early in the Watergate.
So the case is issue. That I'm just so I understand. You're saying we got John Dean who worked for the president. Right. He wasn't he was a lawyer background, but he had a government job. Yeah. But he testified early in the Watergate he's scandal. A liar and we've caught him lying, so you can't trust him. And then that's a case where a liar turned out to be telling the truth about the president. But it's also possible that liars lie and that it's just a farce. Right. 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 I mean, you can not believe, like with North Korea. You can not believe Michael Cohen. Nobody believed John Dean. I mean, except for the ardent Democrats that were against Nixon. You're just saying it's certainly possible because it's happened before. Exactly. So it's not unheard of in our nation's history that somebody who everybody thinks is lying turns out not to be lying about this kind of thing. That's right. I mean, doesn't mean he's not lying about other stuff. Just because he's a convicted liar. I mean, he's been convicted of perjury. Doesn't mean he's lying about this. Well, sure.
Okay.
There's that possibility.
All right.
Okay.
The first one of the 5 takeaways, the president faces peril having nothing to do with Russia. Mr. Cohen said the president had firsthand knowledge of the payment made to Ms. Daniels just before Election Day in 2016 that were part of an effort to silence her from talking about a sexual encounter she said she had with Mr. Trump. Acting at the president's direction, he said he procured a home equity loan to pay Mrs. Daniels $130,000. But Mr. Cohen went one step further and also gave the committee documentary evidence, a copy of a check dated August 1st, 2017 for $35,000 from Mr. Trump's personal bank account that bore Mr. Trump's signature. Mr. Cohen said the check was one of 11 installments that the president made to reimburse him, that is, Cohen. Perhaps most importantly, Mr. Cohen said the president directed him to lie about Mr. Trump's knowledge of the payment to Ms. Daniels. So again, we're getting his viewpoint, Michael Cohen's viewpoint, but
and some potentially supporting documentation.
Exactly. Okay. And the fact of the matter is it's not even Russia. It's the fact that the president knew about this and paid to cover it up, all things which he has denied. President Trump has denied this.
And continues to.
And that that the president directed Mr. Cohen to lie. Now that's, I understand, that's a he said. But again, that's some very damning point being made by Mr. Cohen. So what would be I guess my question to you, and you can respond about anything that I just read about, but my question would be, why would Cohen at this point, when he's facing long jail time and fines, what does he have? Why would he lie?
Because I was thinking about that as I was listening to his testimony. Because that was the main thing, right? Is everybody's going to say, well, this dude's been lying. There's 2 things that come to mind. So there's just plain and simple personal redemption. Want to be remembered for something other than you're just a good for nothing, fixer that got caught and you've always been dirty and you're no good. So trying to do something on a personal level to be a little redeeming so that you're not remembered as just total scum. So there could be that motivation. Again, there's no way to know whether or not that's playing a role at all. I'd imagine that even if he's not lying, say he's telling the truth, that's playing some kind of role, right? Because you've lost everything, you have nothing else to lose. So there's not a lot of motivation, on a personal level. Now there's motivation to do the right thing. And to, even if you've convinced yourself of that, and you are telling the truth, there's still some personal benefit in this, because say it is all found out to be true, right? Then 50 years from now, when people are talking about, Trumpgate or whatever the heck, then in that case, he gets remembered as the guy who happened to be telling the truth that everybody thought was lying, right? Like John Dean. So there could be that. The other thing is, and this is an outside, chance, but when you're facing the kind of time and public humiliation that Cohen is facing, maybe you're willing to go for the outside chance, which is that, of course, because the public testimony is public, it is possible that prosecutors and or Mueller may approach him to try to find something more out or use or ask him to testify for something, and in doing so gives him an opportunity to leverage some kind of deal, that benefits him or his family in some way.
Well, in a couple of his answers, more than Mueller, he talked about the district court of New York. And I can't tell anymore because there are ongoing investigations in the district court of New York. So
exactly. So there's that, there's a possibility. Like I said, I think it's an outside possibility because he's already been sentenced to something, but that doesn't mean that sentences don't change, that people don't get out early, that these deals aren't struck. I mean, it happens. It happens all the time. And it usually happens in a way you don't hear about. So it's there. There is other motivation for continuing to lie. But at the same time, there's motivation not to lie, because now if you get caught lying again, especially at this level, I mean, you're just done, right? There's the Democrats, the Republicans, none of them are going to want to hear from you about anything because it's like, so there's also motivation not to lie, put it that way, from that standpoint.
The second takeaway is possible conspiracy with Russians remains on the table. Mr. Cohen testified that Mr. Trump, on at least a half a dozen occasions in 2016, asked questions about negotiations over building a Trump Tower in Moscow. Quote, Mr. Trump knew of and directed the Trump-Moscow negotiations throughout the campaign and lied about it, Mr. Cohen said in his opening statement. To be clear, Mr. Trump knew of and directed the Trump-Moscow negotiations through the campaign and lied about it. He also cited a June 2016 meeting at Trump Tower in Manhattan with the Russians who claimed to have, quote, dirt on Hillary Clinton. At the meeting were Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, Paul Manafort. At the meeting, according to Cohen, were Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, and Paul Manafort, the Trump campaign chairman. Mr. Cohen also suggested Mr. Trump knew about the meeting, something that the president has denied. He added that Mr. Trump knew in advance that WikiLeaks was going to divulge thousands of emails stolen from the Democrats. He said that Roger Stone Jr., a longtime Trump advisor, told Mr. Trump that he had talked with WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange and that there would be a, quote, massive dump of emails that would damage Hillary Clinton's campaign. According to Mr. Cohen, Mr. Trump responded, wouldn't that be great? So those three things, the Moscow Towers, which Trump says he didn't do, meeting with the Russians about dirt on Hillary Clinton, Trump said he hasn't done that. And President Trump said he had no knowledge of WikiLeaks. And Cohen has been testified that all three of those things are fact.
Yeah. Now, correct me if I'm wrong.
Do you think he's just keeping it alive? Or do you think that where there's smoke, there's fire?
To me, this one's the fastest that we'll move on from, probably, because I looked over the supporting documents that Cohen provided to Congress, okay? And I did not see anything there that supported this. This was like the one thing he said that he wasn't able to provide some kind of corroborating evidence for, other than just he's saying that that's the case. So it is just he said, right. You know, at least on the other thing, there's checks of payments in amounts that add up to what was paid to hush these people that were signed by the president. So again, those checks might have not been for that, but at least you have something else to say. There's a little dab of credibility to what I'm saying, because it's possible, might just be a coincidence, but it might not be, that these checks and these amounts add up to these payments, you know, kind of thing. In this case, it's just, I'm just saying that that's the case.
And okay. I think that's fair.
Yeah.
And if you were just living your life over the last 2 or 3 days and didn't pay attention to all this testimony, the third part of Mr. Cohen's testimony, he explained his role of being a, quote, fixer. Mr. Cohen explained to the members of Congress the concept of catch and kill, a method of stopping a negative article before it was published, in this case by working with the company that owns the National Enquirer. Other duties, he said, included writing threatening letters to schools, warning them against the release of Mr. Trump's academic records, and paying off a woman with compromising information about a presidential candidate. That was my job, Mr. Cohen said. Always stay on message, always defend. It monopolized my life. So not a lot to say. He just explained to Congress, this was what the president hired me to do, and this is what I did. And these are examples of things that I did to fulfill my duties while working for the president, the would-be president and the president.
Right. And in fairness, you know, maybe this sounds repulsive to a lot of people, and it's not that it shouldn't sound repulsive. There are people who have the kind of money and the kind of public brand that Trump does, have these types of people. Maybe they're not as bad as Cohen was, but they have these type of people. They have lawyers whose sole purpose is to try to prevent negative anything, negative press, negative impressions. That's what they do, you know. Yep. And it's not illegal to do that.
But I mean, he's just in case you didn't see it, he just tried to explain what his duties were while working for President Trump.
He kind of admitted, where before it's, you know, it's all just everybody saying that's what he did, and Trump's saying he's his fixer, but nobody knows exactly what that means, and he's saying that's what that means.
The fourth takeaway from his testimony, Cohen savaged Trump's character. He said that the man made bigoted remarks about African Americans in the United States and about predominantly black nations. He said he also carried out orders for Mr. Trump to tell contractors that Mr. Trump was refusing to pay them the money he owed, quote, for their services. He said about avoiding of Vietnam through a medical deferment. Mr. Cohen said Donald Trump said to him, "You think I'm stupid? I wasn't going to Vietnam." In one important piece of exculpatory information for the president, though, he said that despite many rumors, Cohen knew of no tape from an elevator that showed Mr. Trump hitting his wife, Melania. So he says three or four things. Yeah, these are things, that people are out there saying he said. Yeah, he said those. He said those to me. But here's one that people are talking about. That's not true.
Right.
I mean,
or it's not
as
true.
Far as I know.
Right.
Right.
I've never seen or heard anything to suggest that that's the case.
Why throw that in there if you're not telling the truth?
Right. To make it seem like you're telling the truth.
Okay.
I mean, right. I mean, just to play devil's advocate, maybe he knows, maybe he saw the footage and to him, he looks at that and says, that's not the thing that redeems me.
Right.
If I say that that's true, that doesn't get that, this is the thing that I'll say is not true again, not saying that's the case, just saying you can flip it the other way and say, yeah, you say it so that people say, oh, well, it must be telling the truth because.
And finally, if you didn't watch it, just so you know, the fifth takeaway and final one is a retreat to tribal corners. The performance of members of Congress, Republican and Democrat, is unlikely to leave a mark. Mr. Cohen tried to warn Republicans that they today were just like he once was, a supplicant to Mr. Trump. They responded by questioning why should they listen to a man convicted of lying. The questions fell along party lines. Few members seemed to have done deep research to elicit new information, and the polarization of the era was vividly on display.
You mean that our members of Congress aren't as intelligent as they want us to think they are, and they didn't take time to do anything other than partisan politics?
So my takeaway from the 5 takeaways is that there you have it. And while it doesn't seem like Mr. Cohen is a redeemable character, that just remember the name John Dean.
Yes.
And you heard it here.
The one thing that's not mentioned in there and that I have heard almost no coverage on, which to me is noteworthy. Again, it could all be fabricated. These documents that, Cohen's gave to Congress. So it's neither here nor there, but it at least merits mentioning that when I looked at those documents, several of them were copies of asset, basically balance sheets, a record of what was given to Trump on an annual basis showing here's what you're worth, because Trump wanted that. And Cohen mentions that was very important to him, constantly knowing where the value's at. And those documents, again, which could be forged because, it looks like they're just typed up, they're not, these aren't copies of tax returns.
Came from Cohen's office. They're not official documents.
Exactly. So, and that's just like the checks, it's certainly possible to fabricate copies of a check, just saying. But those documents show that Trump's assets, are at least $5 or $6 billion, backing up his claims that he said multiple times that he is a billionaire, where others have said, it's questionable, from an outside standpoint. But these are internal documents. So again, unless they purposefully changed them because they wanted them to come out, you would assume that they're correct because, why would you lie to your own team about it? It'd be one thing to try to make it on taxes look like you don't, because you don't want to pay that much in taxes. But on internal, this is what you're worth documents. Why would you want them to be wrong? Because that doesn't help anybody. So, that to me was something very significant that I've heard almost nobody talk about. Is that according to documents Cohen has released, Trump is indeed a billionaire. So for what that's worth, if that matters to people, it's never mattered to me, really. It's kind of immaterial.
More proof, though, that if he can support the president in some things, he may not be lying about the things that he's reporting on.
That these things might be true.
That aren't favorable to the president.
Because that is supportive of the president.
Exactly. That's my point.
And he even said in his testimony that he thinks some of the things the president wants to do and has done are good things. He said that just in fairness, so it wasn't a total nothing that the president has ever done or will do is any good. It was, I'm just trying to,
lay it on the line, folks.
Yep, lay it on the line.
I'm telling you what I know.
The last thing, and I'll give it to you real quick because I don't have much to say on it, is the Trump ordered officials to give Jared Kushner a security clearance. This broke New York Times yesterday, February 28th. Mr. Trump's decision in May, so troubled senior administration officials that at least one, the White House chief of staff at the time, John F. Kelly, wrote a contemporaneous internal memo about how he had been ordered to give Mr. Kushner the top secret clearance that the president wanted him to have. The disclosure of the memos contradicts statements made by the president, who told the New York Times in January of this year in an Oval Office interview that he had no role in his son-in-law receiving the clearance. Asked on Thursday about the memos, the White House press secretary said, quote, "We don't comment on security clearances." While the president has the legal authority to grant a clearance, in most cases, the White House Personnel Security Office makes a determination about whether to grant one after the FBI has conducted a background check. If there's a dispute in the Personnel Security Office about how to move forward, which is rare, the White House counsel makes the decision. In highly unusual cases, the president weighs in and grants one himself, which is basically, this whole thing boils down to the president and his people have said multiple times that he did not directly influence this. And now the New York Times obtained internal memos that say no, or at least there's people saying that's not how that happened.
Right. That's not the way it went down.
Right. The full scope of the initial background check into Mr. Kushner dragged on for more than a year, creating a distraction for the White House, which struggled to explain why one of the people closest to the president had yet to be given the proper approval to be trusted with the country's most sensitive information. The article does note that the full scope of intelligence officials' concerns about Mr. Kushner is not known, but that clearance had been held up in part over questions about the FBI and the CIA on his foreign and business contacts, including those related to Israel, the United Arab Emirates, and Russia, according to people familiar with the matter.
United Arab Emirates.
Emirates.
Yes.
Yeah.
The UAE. I just have two comments. One is that Kushner is pretty much the go-between with the Saudis. If you remember the whole,
yes,
incident there with the Washington Post reporter, Khashoggi, and, the Crown Prince and all that issue, that is Kushner's, that's kind of what the president has let him be in control of. And we know that the president believes the royal family, that they had nothing to do with it, with the chopping up and murder of the journalist. And then my other comment, just so Kushner's kind of in with that, because you got the Saudi thing. Mm-hmm. So, you've got the Russian thing, you've got North Korea, you got trade deal with China, you got the wall. It's hard to keep it all in place, but just so, just make that statement that Kushner is kind of the go-between for the president for Saudi Arabia. The second one is, this just reminds me of the presidency of Warren G. Harding. And that is, he said, "I'm not worried about my enemies. I am worried about my friends." And here is the president's family also causing him troubles in the press. Be it true or not, it's, goes back to that presidency of 1920 to 1923 of Warren G. Harding, where he was surrounded by people or surrounding himself with people who tried to take advantage of their government job to make themselves rich, and ended up killing him. Right. Not only bringing down his presidency, but he also died of a massive stroke while traveling on the West Coast of the United States while he was still president. And one of the things he said is, "I don't worry about my political enemies. I worry about my damn friends." That's one of his quotes. And that's kind of what this reminds me of, that it's not just, the president here, but there's also those family members and those people close to him that are also entangled in this web. So those are my two takeaways from the Kushner stuff.
To me, it just boiled down to another example of, forget Trump for just a moment, how much authority do we want the president of the United States to have? Should the president be able to override security concerns by law enforcement or the White House, security officials? I mean, right. I don't know. I'm not saying he shouldn't. I'm just saying, to me, it sparks that conversation.
Very good.
Should any president be able to just say, I don't care what the concerns are, you're giving them the clearance?
Right.
I don't know. Maybe.
You're going to do what I say.
Right. That's how it is right now. And there's nothing.
Yeah. If the president did that, he has the right to do it.
Right. If he did it, there's nothing illegal about it.
Right.
The problem, I think, the problem you would have is that it was lied. I mean, they lied about it.
Right.
If the president had just said, yeah, that I did that.
I have the power to, and I did it.
Right. Then.
Well, again, it is that age-old adage, right?
Yeah.
The truth doesn't get you in as much trouble as lying about it.
No.
Even if you did something wrong. Right? Even if you did something wrong.
Yeah, if you just say,
yeah, I did it. Okay, well, now you're in trouble because you're never in as much trouble as
if you lie and
get caught.
Yep. So that's, again, we don't know for sure, but that to me is where my mind went of how much authority do you want a president to have? And on that note, Lance, there's a lot of different ways for people to engage with us. They can do so on social media at TrueChat.org, at TrueChat.org, Facebook, Twitter, and more. So please do engage with us there and let us know your thoughts. And we have a lot of new listeners this year because Lance is just raking them in.
I'm working on
So if we have somebody new listening and they're going to tell somebody else to listen, what are all the ways they can tell people to listen?
Well, I'm going to mix it up. I'm going to go start with Apple Podcast.
Okay.
And anywhere you find podcast, you also have Stitcher. And my personal favorite, Spotify.
And anywhere else that fine podcasts are found, right?
That's what I said.
Okay,
Apple Podcast or any place that you could find.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So
you promoted that twice.
Mixed it up
I know.
In my head.
See, got to keep you on your toes.
Couldn't do it.
You host this show and you let me host and I couldn't read. And boy, that's what happens. But so I just started changing it up on you.
All right. So for the State of Us on True Chat in Urbana, I'm Justin T. Weller.
And I'm Lance Jackson.
Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change.